That handsome young lad is me on one of my first family outings. My parents just loved to pack up my sister Gail and me into the family station wagon and set out from our home in Southern California to see the sights of America. From the west to the east, we would stop at every national monument and roadside attraction we could squeeze into our schedule. I loved to travel so much that 6 days after graduating from high school in 1970, my friend Mike Downs and I rode our bicycles from California to Washington, D.C. These early vacations sparked a lifelong interest in the American tradition of the roadside attraction. The United States is a land of wondrous beauty. You have roaring whitewater rivers, you have the majestic snow-covered mountaintops, you have the arid mystery of the desert. Well, we're not going to see any of that today because we're in Kansas. But what Kansas lacks in beautiful scenery, it more than makes up for in unusual tourist attractions. Join me today on Sweenys America as we explore some of the more underappreciated places in the country. Kansas is made up of hundreds of rural communities. The people are self-reliant, and this isolation can often spark the imagination. Today we start our exploration in western Kansas, just outside of Colby, along Interstate 70. Check out the alluring brochure. Yes, that's a little girl about to kiss a wild rodent. Welcome to Prairie Dog Town. We're visiting the high windy plains outside of Colby, Kansas, where they've built a unique zoo around a community of prairie dogs. But not only that, they have goats, they have sheep, they have six-legged cows, they have things to feed, they have rattlesnakes, but most importantly, they have the world's largest prairie dog. The residents in Prairie Dog Town live behind protective fencing, which is a good thing for them because the prairie dog is often referred to as nature's snack food. Unfortunately, they seem to be at the bottom of every predator's food chain. Excuse me. Okay, there's enough for everyone. Oh, well, thank you. You are friendly here, aren't you? Here in Prairie Dog Town. Excuse me. Okay, if we can all take our turn, if we can all just take our turn. This was one of those tourist stops that only last about a half an hour on the attention span meter. So we headed north on Highway 83 about 90 miles to Highway 36 east to the town of Norton. Have you ever wondered what happened to the candidates that ran for president and lost? Well, yes, a lot of them are dead, but here in a bank building in downtown Norton, they've created a museum dedicated to their memory. It's called the Museum of Also-Rans. Housed in a bank, the gallery has old-fashioned banking hours, so it's open most weekdays between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. But even with this time limit, it's worth the trip to see this collection of nearly great Americans. It's run by Patsy Bernard, who gave me a quick tour of the presidential wannabes. The only candidate with any connection to Norton was Horace Greeley, who once visited the city. Of course, he's best remembered for making the phrase, "Go West, young man," into a marching call for America's late 19th century expansion. All the photos come with a little narrative history of the candidates. In a testimony to perseverance, some of these men actually went on to become president, while others have yet to find their place on the wall. Heading east out of Norton, I continued my trip on Highway 36, 70 miles to Highway 181, and then headed south 20 miles to Highway 24, then east 6 miles to the town of Cocker. This small farming community is home to an ever-expanding legendary object. We're here in Cocker City, Kansas, and I'm standing in front of the world's largest ball of twine. It was begun by a local farmer in 1953, a man named Frank Stober. Mr. Stober died in 1974, but his memory lives on when they have an annual twine-a-thon here in Cocker City, where the school children add balls of twine onto an already enormous ball of twine. It's really enormous. You really have to see this. My destination was the Garden of Eden. So even though the day was getting late, I jumped back into my car and headed west out of Cocker on Highway 24, 14 miles to Highway 281, where I went down 27 miles to Kansas Road 18. There I went east again, 10 miles to the town of Lucas. The lights were still on when I arrived at the Garden of Eden, so I had a quick peek at the mausoleum. At night, it was actually kind of eerie. I spotted a little figure who pointed in the direction of that night's accommodations, the Lucas Country Inn. Located just 2 blocks from the Garden of Eden, this old railroad hotel has been converted into a bed and breakfast style inn, just without the breakfast. It has extremely reasonable rates, and because the hour of my arrival was late, the innkeeper had gone to bed and left the front door unlocked with my key on the desk. The next morning, I found my way back to the gem of Lucas. This is one of my favorite places in the United States. This is called the Garden of Eden, and it's the creation of a Samuel Dinsmore, who was a Civil War veteran, a populist, a Freemason, a folk artist, and in addition to that, at 81 years old, he had to marry a 20-year-old because he fathered a child from her. So he was a very eccentric person, and he began this project when he was 65 years old in 1906, and 22 years and 113 tons of concrete later, he created this magnificent building, and we're going to take a tour of it today, and I think you're going to like it. There is a lot to see at the Garden of Eden, and it's the kind of place that you want to be able to take your time to enjoy. I would say give yourself a couple hours to discover its many wonders. They also offer excellent and informative guided tours. I'm here with John Hockmeister. He's one of the curators here at the Garden of Eden, and he's going to tell us a little bit about the house and give us a short tour.
So when Dinsmore retired at the age of 63 and the Populist Party had ended, everyone thought he would move into town and live out his life quietly. Instead, he announced he was retiring, but he started building this house, and he wanted this house to be a monument to the American worker. He started out with a log cabin style with dovetail limestone. He didn't actually quarry the limestone, but he designed the house. As soon as he finished that, he wanted to build something to last. So he started the porches in concrete, and you can see that most of the concrete is formed up as you would expect concrete to be today, with wooden forms. But Dinsmore being Dinsmore, he wanting this to be about working man in the settling of the United States, he started troweling this concrete and made this center post here. He also had some issues with the Temperance Party and filled beer bottles with concrete and made this frieze. So there was this everlasting
homage to alcohol?
Yeah, monument to beer drinking at a time when Kansas was dry. So the house was finished in 1907.
Okay, so it's finished in 1907. Now, did he have some sort of plan for this garden, or did he just start out with a small project or two?
I think that at the start he was going to do just a usual sort of lawn, kind of like a retired guy would do, right, gardening. And he started out with this grape arbor because by the time he finished the porches, it was obvious he liked concrete. So it started out as a simple grape arbor, ended up being snakes and Adam and Eve, and it goes on and on. But one of the most fascinating parts in this whole sculpture is this little man waving, because Dinsmore was out here working on concrete instead of spending any time with his wife, and he felt bad about it, and this is the kitchen window. So he modeled, this is the first figurative piece he did, and he modeled it so that when his wife was washing the dishes, she could look out, see this little guy waving, and know that Dinsmore was thinking of her.
Oh, that's great. So what started out basically as a simple weekend project as a great arbor turned into the Garden of Eden.
That's right. He didn't really, through all these sculptures, he didn't know where he was going. It was a very intuitive process, and you can see that what started out as just free, as formed concrete, ends up being these snakes. There's Adam, here's Eve. He was a mason, so Adam had to have a Masonic apron on.
Oh, I noticed that. There's a lot of Masonic symbolism here, isn't there?
That's right. It figured into the free thought part that, of his philosophy that he believed in so strongly. He also really liked to get a rise from people in town, so he modeled these nude first. And then this is obviously not exactly an apron. It was going to be her hair kind of coming down.
So this was a two-part process. He would do the figures nude, I noticed in some of these other sculptures, and then he would actually put a layer of concrete clothes on them.
That's right, and all the sculpture is white concrete underneath, and where we see the clothing eroding away, we can see this white concrete of an arm, for instance, coming through the jacket in places.
So you say Mr. Dinsmore was a Freemason.
Yes, he was, and the Freemason symbolism shows up all over the garden, like the tallest piece here, the all-seeing eye.
So that's the same all-seeing eye that you find on the dollar bill right above the pyramid, right?
That's right. Not being a Mason, I don't really know the significance of it, but I do know that this is a fairly unique one in that it used to speak. When Dinsmore made it, he put a hollow tube running up to the top, and when he used it for two things. When people were out here, he would go back into the house and speak, so it sounded like the all-seeing eye was talking to him.
So his voice would run right up that tree and out that little hole there, right?
That's right. And the other thing that people remember more is that when little kids would come here, because this is a kid magnet, little kids would sneak into the yard, and if he looked out the window and saw one, the all-seeing eye would tell them to get out of the garden.
They would run home to their parents. Mommy, the big eye told me to leave.
Here's another all-seeing eye, and it's above Abel's body, and the eye is pointing at Cain and his wife.
So, and this is the angel that's coming to pick up the slain brother Abel, while a laughing dog looks on. Is that...
Yeah, that's his dog, and that's his wife, who's just discovered the body. And here we have Cain running out of the Garden of Eden with his wife and looking back at the accusing eye and finger.
This corner marks a sort of transition. In the front of the building, Dinsmore becomes less interested in retelling biblical tales and more involved in documenting the ways of modern man.
This is all about the trusts, which were the corporations of the time, and it portrays the greed and the damage that it did.
So I see the octopus is eating money, and it has its tentacles wrapped around the world, symbolizing its greed. And help me out here.
It's also grabbing the woman and around the waist, and it has a tentacle going into the food satchel of the soldier. Because Dinsmore said that you can control some people some ways, but men you can always control by their food.
I see.
The flag is also concrete, and it was placed, Dinsmore put that above the trust because at the time the federal government protected the corporate greed that was going on.
This flag is really interesting. I read about this. It's 4 foot by 7 foot. It's made out of concrete, and it pivots with the wind. It actually turns on its own.
It's really incredible because it's 80 years now it's been turning in the wind. Sometimes very intense winds out here. About 60 feet of the sculpture in front of this building has to do with social Darwinism, which was not something Darwin dreamed up, but someone named Herbert Spencer. Herbert Spencer came up with this idea that anybody who was powerful could do anything they wanted to anyone who was weaker because it was natural law. And he said, and he went on to say that not only could you, you should do it, because that's how everybody became stronger. And so the corporations had a lot of power, so they had the right to get as much money as they could. And so they're grabbing the woman and controlling the food of the soldier. The Civil War soldier is shooting at this Native American because he has more power than the Native American. The Native American on this tree is shooting an arrow at a dog on the next tree. The dog is crawling up a tree to attack a fox. The fox is moving across a limb to eat a bird. The bird is reaching out to eat this little caterpillar, and the caterpillar is eating a leaf. And Dinsmore said, that it doesn't have to be that way, but I'm reporting what I have seen in my lifetime.
That's amazing. Just fabulous. Now this one here is unless I'm mistaken, this is the Goddess of Liberty.
That's right. The Goddess of Liberty was constructed right around the Russian Revolution. And it has, again, it shows a goddess killing a trust, killing an octopus. But you'll notice that there's other people around it. And there's a man and a woman with a big concrete saw marked the ballot. Dinsmore said that the common man is settling his problems with government with bullets in Russia. But I believe that in America we can settle them with the ballot.
And now these smaller figures, the woman and looks like an African American and maybe another smaller figure.
A little funny guy with a hat.
Right,
yeah.
right. Tell me about those.
Well, at the time that he did this sculpture, women didn't have the right to vote. Minorities basically were excluded, couldn't vote. And recent immigrants couldn't vote. And recent immigrants especially was a hard point for him because he had been in the Civil War. He'd been a nurse in the Civil War, so he saw the worst of what a war would do. A lot of immigrants were drafted right off the boat. They walked off the boat to come to the United States, and instead of a land of opportunity, they were put in the Union Army.
Oh my gosh. Well, that all ties in with his progressive populist philosophy.
That's right.
He was very ahead of his time, wasn't he?
He really was, and he felt so strongly about all this sculpture, or all these issues. So when he did these sculptures, he wanted everybody to know for all time what had been going on.
Okay, so we're going to the next building. We have a three-story pyramid-like building, and it is the actual mausoleum. And is it true that he and his wife are both buried there?
Yes, they are. And he always intended to be in the mausoleum and on view. I mean, he was a showman. He liked the notoriety. So he made his own concrete coffin, of course. It would be concrete. And after his first wife died and was buried, well, he put her in the mausoleum and then remarried and had 2 children and got fairly old and died. And he had worked out a deal to be embalmed, but nobody exactly knew how. He wanted to be embalmed like the Egyptians. Nobody knew how to do it, so they kind of guessed, and it didn't work very well. But they put him in the concrete coffin. They stuffed him with charcoal, put him in the coffin, put him in there. Almost immediately he started growing mold, so they closed the mausoleum, and it remained closed from the 30s until 1969 when it was reopened. Outside the mausoleum here to the right is Labor Crucified.
Okay, this is a piece. Now this doesn't look quite finished.
It isn't finished. This is the last piece that Dinsmore did. And this is about 1925 to 1928, somewhere in there. He was working on it, but he was going blind. So it's probably the most bitter piece. And maybe because he was going blind, he was getting really old by then. He did this sculpture that was about labor really being put upon by people.
Yes, it's being crucified by a doctor, a lawyer, bankers, and a preacher. And I notice he has a little commentary note down below that says that he couldn't list all of the people that are attacking the little man. It is one of his most bitter pieces, I think.
It certainly is.
I think you can tell why this is one of my favorite places. It really is wonderful. The Samuel Dinsmore Cabin Home and Garden is just a short side trip north of I-70, and it's open every day of the year from 10 to 5. As an added bonus, I discovered this 98-year-old woman named Florence Devil, who, as a child, watched Mr. Dinsmore build the garden. As a result, she became a concrete artist and, among other things, built a reproduction of Mount Rushmore in her own backyard. Partially as a result of the Garden of Eden, Lucas has become a center of interest for outsider art and has recently opened a showcase for some of the area's more eccentric, untrained artists. This is a relatively new addition to the Lucas downtown area. This is the Grassroots Arts Center, and this is the director, Rosalind Schultz.
Well, welcome to the Art Center, and let me introduce you to Ed Root, one of our local grassroots artists that live just south of town. Ed Root farmed all of his life, and when he retired, turned the farm over to the boys and said, well, I've got to do something now. So what's it going to be? So
I think we found out here.
Concrete at that time was new technology. As with the Garden of Eden here in Lucas at the turn of the century, it was fascinating for people to work with. And so he decided to work in concrete also, but to embellish it a little bit with the broken glass, rocks, shells, dishes, anything that was within reach. He incorporated into his pieces doorknobs, the old porcelain doorknobs, milk and magnesia, 7-Up bottles, petrified wood, even kind of metal toys, the little rabbit back there in the doorstop. Also other things are used fuses and buttons.
And this is a picture of him and his family.
Correct.
Which one is Ed?
Ed is to the far left, and his wife, and then these are other family members.
So he's already started his creations
in
here.
1930s is when he began out creating embellishment at the edge of his farmstead, and people still to this day remember that, because when the sunlight hits these pieces, I mean, they just, really glisten. And so as the 1940s and 50s went on, more pieces were added out by the edge of the road, back by his house, a whole nother area, then inside his house. And so he had interior hangings. He even lined the walls of his outhouse with the same type of treatment. So once they become
Once he got started, he couldn't stop.
Right, to what they're doing.
Now these are all Kansas artists.
True.
Everyone featured here.
Right. Kansas ranks only behind the states of California and Wisconsin in having numerous people creating in anything from wood to concrete to Clorox bottles to metal, and who knows what else.
Outsider art.
You haven't, right. It's non-defined as fine art and not folk art, from the sense that folk art usually is handed down from generation to generation, such as quilting. And these people just spring up on their own, and children don't usually follow in their footsteps.
So Kansas kind of cultivates this sort of weirdness, huh?
From what I've been reading, Kansas and Midwesterners in particular have that thought that they can do just about anything. We do a little woodworking, a little electrical, a little plumbing. Well, why? Well, what's going to stop you? Maybe you've poured a concrete floor. That's enough criteria for creating sculpture.
Now this is part of the crown jewel of the center's collection. These sculptures are from a woman named Ines Marshall, who was a sculptress in town. That's how she referred to herself, as a sculptress. And this is a tribute to John F. Kennedy, and this is not carved wood. This is painted carved limestone. And it's all full of Kennedy memorabilia, and perhaps you can tell me some of the symbolism of this.
Certainly. certainly. She had a vision about this table. On the narrow ends, there are only 4 ledges. Those represent the 4 years that John F. Kennedy was to serve as President of the United States. Now, on the longer sides, there are just 3. In the 3rd year of his presidency, this vine choked out his life. And then the bird has a little placard in his mouth that says 35th President.
Oh my God. How long did this take her to do?
This, over 3 years, this takes 4 men to carry in. When we talk about limestone in Kansas, which a lot of our fence posts and building material through the central part of the state, a fence post would weigh 400 pounds. So 4 men carried this in and placed it. She would quite dramatically. This was draped in a black cloth, so you didn't see it. There were church pews. You had to sit, be perfectly quiet before she did the unveiling of this piece. She was quite a show woman, and hers was, when we talk about most of these people being in retirement years, hers was through a disability. How she started carving after she was a truck driving woman, mechanic, and
an evangelist.
Oh yes, evangelist, barber, musician. But she didn't cook, from what I understand. And she had a broken back after she fell asleep at the wheel driving a truck. Oh, no. And rolled the truck, had a broken back. For 18 months she was in convalescence and was there at home, looked out, saw this piece of limestone, said, "Dad, bring it in. Mom, get the paring knife and the breadboard and let me see what I can do." So it all started from that, and then 51 years of carving after that.
And a lot of these are based on her vision. She just sees them as her visions that come to her. I still can't believe that something like this schoolhouse was built out of a solid piece of limestone. One of the great things about the Grassroots Art Museum is that it exhibits rather isolated artists whose work would otherwise never be shown. Next week on Sweenys America, we're going to continue our journey through Kansas and visit some more of its hidden tourist gems. I'm Gary Sweeney, and we'll see you next time on Sweenys America.